Chair Bienvenue, we are live. You may begin.
Thank you, Heather. I now call this meeting to order. We are now in session at the Historic District Review Board meeting duly noticed for November 28, 2023. Tonight, for better or for worse, I will be serving as acting chair in the absence of Chair Rios and Vice Chair Guida. May I have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Chair Rios is excused. Vice Chair Guida is excused, as is Member Aguilar Medrano. Member Beachside,
I'm here.
thank you. Member Bienvenue.
Here.
Member Mather.
Here.
Member Valdo.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We have an agenda that has been duly published. Do any members or staff have changes to be proposed to the agenda? Staff? Heather?
I thought Amanda Romero may answer. No changes. Thank you, Chair.
There was a request on the published notice, or at least the one I received, for one of the matters to be postponed. Is that still, has that request been withdrawn? The fourth item on the agenda?
That case will be postponed to the January 9th.
Okay, so I think because of the way the agenda is printed, it includes item 4, but with a note that there is a request to be postponed. So I think that we would need to have an approval, a motion to approve the agenda with the request to be postponed to January 9, 2023 being granted, and the agenda being amended accordingly. Is there a motion?
Beachside so moves.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in, well, roll call vote, please.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We next have on the agenda approval of the minutes of November 14, 2023. Board members, are there any changes to the minutes?
Member Beachside has a couple of changes.
You please proceed.
On page 9, in the motion, first paragraph, the middle of that paragraph reads 34-inch long wall is primary and no other facades as primary. Please strike the rest of that sentence and replace with excluding non-historic overhang as well as all non-historic doors and windows.
Thank you.
And
Anything
then,
else?
yes, and then in the 5th paragraph of the motion, just correct the reference to it's incorrectly referencing historic windows. It should say she was just excluding the overhang and non-historic windows and doors. And then one more on page 20, the last paragraph of the applicant's presentation. Please replace the word hand with had, H-A-D. Thank you.
You. Are there any other proposed changes from board members? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve?
Beachside moves to approve the minutes of November 14th, 2023 as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather.
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have approval of findings of fact and conclusions of law for 2 cases heard on September 12, 2023. They are 2023-006503 HDRB at 1243 Canyon Road and 2023-007140 HDRB at 1369 Cerro Gordo Road. Board members, are there any proposed changes to the findings of fact and conclusions of law? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Beachside moves to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Valdo,
Yes.
Member Beachai,
Yes.
Member Mather.
yes,
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next, we have matters from the public. If there are any members of the public in the room wishing to speak, please come to the podium to speak, and please try to limit your comments to 2 minutes. I see no one. Heather, is there any members of the public online wishing to speak?
Yes, we have Stephanie Beninato.
Thank you. Could you unmute her and have her sworn in?
Mr. Chair, she does not need to be sworn in under public comment.
Oh, thank you. Correct. Please proceed, Ms. Beninato.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things. I noticed at 604 Galisteo that there's a permit to do an addition on that building. That is a contributing building. And I may have missed it, but I don't remember seeing any notice of a historic board meeting. I go down that street fairly frequently, like several times a week generally. So I'm bringing it to your attention. And also because I find that the city has been approving a lot of permits that seem to more than are covering more than 50% of the lot, taking up what is needed off-street parking, which this building too would lose parking if it had an on-ground addition. So anyway, I'm bringing it to the board's attention. I hope somebody will look into whether they, whether they came to the H board and when that happened. And I apologize if it did, but again, I don't remember seeing that happen at all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Heather, is there anyone else online who wishes to speak?
Chair Bienvenue now.
Thank you. There being no old business, we now move on to new business. Oh, actually, we have staff communications next. Are there any communications from staff?
Chair Bienvenue, just one little piece of good news. Today was the deadline for the submission of proposals for the general plan update, and we received 4 proposals. So we'll embark on the evaluation and selection process. We have a committee that's been selected, and will be more to come. That's all.
Thank you for that. So we will skip over old business since there is none on the agenda and move on to new business. I would like to inform the applicants and members of the public that if you disagree with any decision that is rendered by the board tonight or any night, the applicant and some members of the public do have a right of appeal to the governing body, and the deadlines and procedures for such an appeal are set forth in section 14-3.17 of the city code. The first case is 2023-007552 HDRB at 50 Mount Carmel Road. Whether this is your case, is the applicant in the room or online?
I believe the applicant may be in the room.
Great, so we can
I cannot
proceed.
see, but we corresponded today.
I see them and they're waving.
Okay, thank you.
Great, so Heather, would you like to present your staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is case 2023-7552-HDRB, located at 50 Mount Carmel Road, the Fatima Building in the Historic Review District. The request is door replacement on primary facades. You may recall that this case has previously come to the Historic District's Review Board. Back in 2022, July 26, 2022, the board considered all of the buildings that are highlighted here for the historic statuses, and Fatima Building was included as part of that and was designated as contributing at that time. Later in the year, there were several buildings that came to the board for consideration for renovation treatments. No major changes were being made to Fatima. There were some HVAC improvements and the like that were approved administratively. But since then, the applicant has requested some minor changes that need to be heard by the board. So just to provide an overview of the evolution of the site, originally the 50 Mount Carmel campus was part of the Sunmount Sanatorium. Later at that time, or during the Sunmount Sanatorium years, the San Miguel building was designed and built. And after Sunmount left, John Galmim and some partners tried to market the site as the Santa Fe Inn, which was short-lived. For a short while also, during World War II, the San Miguel building was, Santa Maria building was made into the Bruins Sunmount Auxiliary. This is associated with the Bruins Army Hospital, which is on the current Midtown campus. Later, the Archdiocese of the Immaculate Heart of Mary Seminary was located on the campus. And in 1952, the Fatima building was constructed as a gymnasium as part of the Heart of Mary Seminary School. And currently, prior to the current ownership by the Modern Elder Academy, the Order of Carmelite Sisters owned the campus. So as I stated, the Fatima building was constructed in 1952 as part of the high school for the seminary. It is currently used for the Santa Fe photographic workshops, as among other types of classes. And it was designated back in July 26 of 2022 as contributing, and the west and the south elevations were considered primary. And that included the entire area of the courtyard. So as you can see in the photo on the left, the courtyard is pictured, and there is the yard wall that encloses that courtyard area. And then this is the west elevation on the right-hand side picture. Here's an illustration of the primary facades. This graphic illustrates the office building, which is attached to be a breezeway, but is not part of the Fatima building itself. And so the south elevations, including the courtyard, which I've highlighted here in yellow, and those west elevations are considered as primary. The blue arrows indicate the proposed door replacements that are the subject of this evening's hearing. A door assessment was provided and is included as part of your packet. And as you can see, the original drawings that were provided also as part of your packet. The applicant is proposing to replace the doors to match those historic doors that were part of the design. A picture of here, which you can see on the inside patio of those main primary front doors. The other doors are also illustrated in the packet for replacement as well. These doors are consistent with the historic design. Here is a graphic also of that interior courtyard, illustrating those doors that are proposed to be replaced. Also, there will be some doors on the west elevation that are replaced, which is also a primary facade. Staff's recommendation is for approval as it complies with section 14.5.2C1, regulation contributing to significant structures, and complies with section 14-5.2D5, windows, doors, and other architectural features. As you know, their design has been provided, illustrating the different type of door. Then the replacement of a door of the original design is not of concern to staff, and so therefore staff recommends approval. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Do any board members have any questions of staff? Online? All right, then. Can we have the applicant come to the podium and be sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Lisa Gavioli, 130 Grant Avenue.
Welcome. Nice to see you. What would you like to add to staff's presentation?
I don't have a, Madam or Mr. Chair, I don't have a lot to add. Mr. Chair, members of the board, as I was saying, I don't have a lot to add. Heather's presentation was very thorough. I think I'll just fly through some of the slides that I prepared for this evening. So we're here on behalf of Modern Elder Academy, also on the design team, Architectural Alliance, Surroundings, and Design Ingenuity. And we're in the Historic Review District. And as Heather mentioned, just a little bit of background, in July of 22, the historic status was designated for all the buildings on the property. In December of 22, the board approved the demolition of a carport on the property and the construction of a new classroom and dormitory building. And then in January of 23, the Board of Adjustment approved a special use permit to allow for the intensification of the use of the Educational Retreat Center by constructing that new building on the site. In that same month, the HDRB approved the renovations of Santa Maria, San Miguel, and San Juan, those 3 buildings on the property. And then in February, the HDRB approved the construction of a yard wall and an entry gate for the property. And then in March, we worked with historic preservation staff to administratively approve maintenance and repair changes to the other buildings on the property. But just a little reminder of status here. My pointer does work. So this building here, number 7, is Fatima. Red on this graphic indicates a contributing status. Yellow indicates significant status, and the brown are non-contributing buildings. Just for reference to orient us. The proposed site plan, you will see this is Fatima, the office building next to it, the new building that's been approved here. And once again, the primary facades. Heather indicated that this courtyard on the south is also included in the primary facade of Fatima. Slide through some existing condition photographs. So the building was designed as the main high school building for the seminary in 1952. And so it includes both classrooms and gymnasium. In this graphic, I'm just indicating again the doors that are being proposed for replacement. And there are doors at both ends of this long hallway that separates the classrooms from the gymnasium, as well as the front entry doors, and then a door on the east side of the courtyard and a door on the west side of the courtyard. And some photographs of the existing doors. The existing doors were, we had a door assessment conducted. The existing doors are painted wood with diamond glass. What is it called? It's like security glass from the 1980s. So this is a photo of the front doors as you see them, not very attractive. On either side of the courtyard. And this is just a little close-up indicating that diamond wire float glass. That's the term I was trying to recall. Again, this is an image, not very great image of the original design for the building in 1952. We can only assume that these were the original doors that were replaced at some point, probably in the 80s. And again, these are the elevations. This was the top elevation you'll see is what was originally approved by the HDRB. And actually it was approved by staff, but regardless. And the bottom is the revised showing the new doors. So you'll see here This is the design. It's basically a 3-light bifold door with side lights. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Online? There are none. Is there anyone in the room, any members of the public in the room that wish to comment on this application? If so, please step to the podium and be sworn in.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy, number 14, Avenida Campo Verde, Santa Fe.
Please proceed, Mr. Eddy.
It looks very lonely up there. Glad there are at least two of you. I'm just curious if there is a more detailed depiction of what these doors look like. Obviously, they have 3 panels of glass in them. Are there other doors that are original to the property that these doors match, is my question to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. If the applicant wishes to answer the question, the applicant may do so.
I don't know the answer to the question. I don't believe there are any existing doors of that particular design. We believe that the proposed design, which replicates the historic design, is completely appropriate for this 1950s building. And so that is what we're proposing.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room that wishes to comment? Are there any members of the public online that wish to comment?
Chair
on this
Bienvenue,
application?
yes. Stephanie Benato would like to speak. And Stephanie, please state your name and address and be ready to be sworn.
Yes, Stephanie Benato, P.O. Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a similar question to as Mr. Eddy did. From what I see of the drawings, the doors do not look as busy as they look in the proposed drawings. It looks like there's more panes of glass in the proposal than in the original. And I do think there will be an improvement, excuse me, over the existing doors, but again, I don't know why. I mean, I wonder how accurate the doors really are. And I appreciate they're going back to an older design, but I'm wondering how that complies with the ordinances that were cited. I don't see anything in the ordinance that says if you take it back to an older design, it's okay, or that's a hard, you're, I don't know, a hardship or whatever those requirements really are. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else online, Heather?
No, Chair Bienvenue.
Thank you. Members of the board, any further comments, discussion, or questions? All right, I will entertain a motion.
This is Member Beachside. I wonder if the applicant might just explain the materials and the paint color, if it's applicable to the doors.
Mr. Chair, Member Beachside. The proposed materials are a metal-clad wood door in an off-white color to match the painted trim on the existing building, similar to the color of the existing doors.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm ready to make a motion, Chair Bienvenue.
Please proceed.
In case number 2023-007552-HDRB at 50 Mount Carmel Road, I move to approve the application as submitted for the approval of the replacement of the doors as indicated as consistent with the documented original design drawings.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
If there is a motion and second, Before I proceed to a roll call vote, or is there any further discussion desired by the board or any further comments? Okay, but also before we proceed to vote, I'd just like to explain one thing to the applicant and the members of the public, where you can tell we're in something of an unusual situation tonight. We have 3 board members that are absent, but we do have a quorum. And under these circumstances, my understanding of the voting rules, and I'm going to ask our Assistant City Attorney, Mr. Riebelleid, to confirm this, is that the City of Santa Fe Rules and Procedures for city committees provides that the vote of a majority of the members present shall decide any question. And the city attorney's office interprets that provision to mean not that a majority of the board needs to vote in favor, but rather that a majority of the board, of the members present, need to vote. So in this particular case, since there are 4 members present, in order to have a valid vote, we would need 3 voting members, but the vote will be determined by a majority of those 3 voting members. So I just want to clarify the city attorney's interpretation of the code when we are down to the numbers that you see present tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, Acting Chair Bienvenu, that is correct. Under Robert's Rules of Order, as well as common law and just the general rules of statutory construction, the fact that the board chair is present but cannot vote does not count as a 4th member. The abstention does not count one way or the other. The count is made among the voting members only.
All right, thank you. A roll call vote on the pending motion, please.
Member Beachite,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, and thank you, applicant.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is the second application, 2023-007525 HDRB 913 1/2 Acequia Madre. Is the applicant present? Yes.
Good
We
evening,
may
Chair.
proceed.
Bienvenu, board members. Just give me one moment, please.
Sure. Whenever you're ready, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, Chair, members of the board. This is case 2023-007525 HDRB, located at 913 and a half Acequia Madre in the downtown and Eastside Historic District. 913 and a half Acequia Madre is a single-family residence listed as non-contributing to the downtown and Eastside Historic District. The structure was built in 1940 on a 0.10 acre lot, which totaled 1,702 square feet. The primary architectural design of the structure is a collaboration between Spanish Pueblo Revival and Santa Fe vernacular styles, which includes adobe and concrete block for construction materials, a flat shed roof, wood and aluminum shingle hung 3/1 and 1/1 windows. The structure has undergone an evolution of construction and additions throughout time. The original core of the structure is the north and northeastern facades, which contain the integrity of the historic district standards as seen through the adobe wall construction and recessed 3/1 wood-framed windows. These 2 facades are being recommended as primary. The portal over the eastern facade entryway is most likely the first addition to this structure. And as construction continued, additions were made to the southern facade, adding another room and garage by the 1970s. The clear and distinct evolution of the property can be observed through the construction material and design of the structure. Here are the existing north elevation and east elevation, the existing south elevation, and the existing west elevation. Here's a historic aerial photograph from 1958, courtesy of John Murphy in his HCPI form, indicating the initial construction of the home. In 1973, an aerial photograph shows an addition, showing the addition of the laundry room to the west facade, the porch to the east facade, and the freestanding garage to the south. In 1978, an aerial photograph shows the new addition of the family room connecting the three structures. Here's a layout that Mr. Murphy provided in his HCPI form, showing the original adobe dwelling, the porch structure, and the additions throughout time. Here's the facade diagram showing in green numbers 1 through 4, which are being recommended as primary, being the core of the structure. Here's a photograph of the north facade. And photographs of the east facade showing the 3/1 windows and the porch. In this recommendation, we are not recommending the portal, just the northeastern facade. Staff recommends the historic status of the structure be upgraded to contributing with the north and northeastern facades as identified on the facade diagram 1 through 4 be designated as primary. For 14-5.2C, designation of significant and contributing structures, and 14-5.2E, downtown and east side design standards. Staff stands for questions.
Thank you, Paul. Just one quick question from me. Is this currently statused, or is it not yet received status?
Chair Bienvenu, that is correct. It has been given a non-contributing status
And when was that?
in 1983.
Thank you. Board members, questions for staff? Online? Okay, no questions. So we will have the applicant come to the podium and be sworn in, please.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Richard Martinez. My address is 1524 Paseo de Peralta. That's where my office is, Martinez Architecture Studio.
Good evening, Mr. Martinez. Welcome, and please proceed with whatever you would like to add or inform the board members of.
Yes. Okay. So I believe that this house should not be upgraded from non-contributing to contributing status. The staff says in the recommendation that the, quote, the original core of the structure is the north and northeastern facades, which contain the integrity of the historic district standards as seen through adobe wall construction and recessed 3/1 wood frame windows. The clear and distinct evolution of the property can be observed through the construction material and design of the structure. Let me repeat that. The clear and distinct evolution of the property can be observed through the construction material and design of the structure. In other words, the significance of this building is that it's been changed and it has evolved over time. Why stop that evolution now? By elevating this to contributing, we would be stopping that evolution of the building. I can think of many reasons why non-contributing status would be advantageous for the structure. The building sits right in the middle of the lot, and there's only small slivers of available space in the rear and in the front in which additions can be made to the house. And those additions would be in front of this primary facade if that was the case. What if somebody wants to raise the parapets? Let's say that they would, the parapets are very low right now, so it's not the best way to roof the building. Let's say that they wanted to put solar on the roof. The parapets would need to be raised. That would be problematic in any primary facade. There is on the north facade, the roof has an overhang. It's one of those where you have parapets around 3 sides and the overhang on the 4th side. That's not the best way to roof a building. Ideally, the parapet would be constructed on that side, and it would be re-roofed and directed towards those towards canales in that parapet, rather than just a simple overhang that goes the full length of the facade. The historian, John Murphy, who did the report, recommends maintaining the non-historic status, non-contributing status. I want to quote what he says. He says, "The oldest portion of the house, the adobe east-west bedroom wing at the north, is at least 80 years old. It is plain east and north. Its plain east and north elevations show original windows and reveal mostly an unaltered exterior appearance. To this were attached several additions, the most recent from circa 1976, connecting the older home to a once freestanding garage. The composite development of the building gives it a ranch house appearance. Given the recent extensions and the fact that they represent a good deal of the house's square footage and footprint, the recommendation is to maintain the non-contributing status to the downtown and east side historic district." So the historian who studied this house and its history recommends that it be maintained as non-historic. Incidentally, and he took into account, though, in his report, the east and north elevations, which the staff is recommending as the primary elevations, as representing some part of the building, but given the whole of the building, he recommends non-contributing status. I also want to note that the original windows that he notes in this building are all covered by metal windows because those windows are non-functional and rotten and have been for a very long time. They are all covered by non-historic aluminum-clad windows. It's true that the original wood windows are there, but they are not on the facade. They're inside of other windows. They are all covered. They are all covered, and they need to be replaced. I've not had any window report done on the windows because it's obvious that they need to be replaced. So for those reasons, I believe that this house should not be upgraded. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Board members, questions for the applicant? Online?
I have a question for Paul.
Sounds like Member Mather. Please go ahead.
Chair Bienvenu, Member Mather. Yes, ma'am.
So the The north-facing facade and the east-facing facade are the ones that you're looking at being contributing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how much of that can you see from the street?
The northeastern facade you can see from the street. The north
Pretty well?
facade, pretty well.
Okay,
It abuts the street. The north facade, you can get a glimpse of it from the street, but very little,
okay. If you're driving by or walking by, you just don't catch much of it?
not at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions from members online? All right. Are there members of the public in the room who wish to be heard on this application? So please step forward. There appear to be none. Are there any members of the public online who wish to be heard?
Yes, Stephanie Benenato.
Thank you. Ms. Benenato, have you been sworn? If you're unmuted, please proceed.
Stephanie Benenato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I think what we're looking at really is whether these are contributing to the streetscape and or distinctive of the house. And whether you can see something, I mean, if it was all the way in the back and totally not visible, maybe it wouldn't be contributing. But I bet that if you're walking along the street, you would see the north side, and definitely you're seeing the east side. I don't think that something that got added on in 1976 is exactly new, and that most of the additions were occurring before 1973, as far as we can see from the aerial photographs. I think it was also inappropriate to talk about what you want to do or could do, because really it's about the building itself and its character and its contribution, rather than what somebody wants to do, because we all know there's a mechanism called exceptions that an applicant can come forward and ask for. And the other thing I have to say is that the interpretation of the 2-to-1 vote is absolutely ludicrous. As you know, as a lawyer, you do not add words to a law, and the law clearly says that a majority of the members present, that would include everybody, including the chair, that they must decide the issue, not vote on the issue. And I'd like to read something to you from the city.
Stephanie, I'm gonna have to stop you there. I would, all those comments would be well received, and I encourage you to submit them. But right now, we're on another topic, which is the pending application. So if you could either submit those in writing to the board or present them at the next public comment, that would be very much
Okay,
appreciated.
I just want to say that if you don't do if you can't come to a consensus, that it's an illegal vote. And I will make comments next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did you have any other comments on the pending application?
No, I just think that the staff report, the staff recommendation should be upheld. Because I do think that it is an older building and that most of the additions occurred before 1973, and kind of dismiss the whole building because a connection was made in 76, which is 47 years ago, seems a little bit of like a throwaway of a building that could be contributing to our town, and we are losing them in way too great a number. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any?
Can I respond to that?
You may, you may.
First of all, the recommendation from the historian is to maintain the non-contributing status, and that's what we're arguing for. Regardless of the recommendation from the staff, the recommendation, I believe, from the person who has most closely looked at this building and is most sensitive to how it contributes to the streetscape, the historian has recommended non-contributing status.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online, members of the public, that wish to comment? Heather.
Chair Benvenu, no.
All right. Board members, back to you. Any further discussion, questions? All right, I will entertain a motion. Board members,
I move that we make the building contributing.
Member Mather has moved to make the building contributing, and did you want to include in your motion a primary facade designation? Member Mather?
Sorry, Zoom meltdown. Yes, I want to include in the motion that we take staff's recommendation of the north side and the northeast side. Is that correct, Paul?
Chair Bienvenu, Member Mather, that's correct.
Do you want to do we have numbers designating the facades that you're recommending? Because it's not all of these facades. So it's 3, 4, and 2 on the eastern elevation?
One's the northern elevation, 2 would be the northeastern facade with the window, the 3/1 window. 3 would be underneath the portal, the south-facing facade. And 4 would be where the entry door and the window are. Okay.
Right, and you're not including 5 or 6 of the eastern elevation, correct?
That is correct.
Is that consistent with your motion, Member Mather?
That is consistent with my motion, yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Before I proceed to a roll call, do any board members wish to have any further discussion on the pending motion?
John, this is Member Beechai. Can you hear me?
Yes, please
Oh,
proceed.
sorry. Thank you. I just for as a point of discussion, I think you couldn't hear me earlier, so I apologize for interjecting this here, but I have a different opinion than the motion that's on the floor, and I just wanted to offer it for the board's consideration. I look at the long east facade. Half of that was added in the 1970s. The original Adobe late 1950s building is there, but also half of that is covered by the frame 1970s porch. I think as a result, as noted in the HICP report, the facade reads as more of a 1950s ranch style house, which changes the sense of history associated with this house. The footprint is no longer the same. And I think the additions clearly weren't sensitive, as evidenced by the result that this looks like a different style of house now. So I just wanted to offer that as an alternate opinion.
Thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Okay, we'll proceed to a roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
No.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you, applicant. Next item on the agenda is 2023-007411 HDRB at 135 Grant Avenue. This is Paul's case. I believe the applicant is still in the room, so we may proceed.
Chair Bienvenu, one moment, please.
Sure.
Chair Bienvenu, members of the board. This is case 2023-007411, 135 Grant Avenue. 135 Grant Avenue is the Otero Bagari House and now houses the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum Administration offices. It is listed as a significant structure to the downtown and east side historic district. The property at 123 Grant Avenue is a former Safeway building and is designated as a non-contributing structure to the downtown and east side historic district. The white wooden picket fence on the western property line and the masonry stuccoed wall on the eastern and southern property line of the Otero Bulgari property are contributing structures to the downtown and east side historic district. The applicant is proposing the following. 1, demolition of the wall in order to allow for the construction of the new Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. And 2, alteration of the picket fence in order to improve site access and expand the public sidewalk along Grant Avenue. The white wooden picket fence was constructed between the 1870s to 1880s at the time of the Fort Marcy Military Reservation, was active and initially served as a property boundary marker delineating the yard of one of the officers' quarters. The wooden fence at 135 Grant Avenue has undergone renovations in 1912, the 1970s, and into the early 2000s. The masonry stuccoed wall at 123 Grant Avenue was constructed pre-1958 and established the eastern and southern property boundaries on the north side of the property. The wall has undergone previous maintenance and construction between 1941 and the early 2000s, as seen by the height variations on the east and south sides. The white wooden picket fence and the masonry stuccoed wall represent a historic reference point to which is significant to the streetscape and contributes to the sense of place, which is an essential part of the Grant Avenue streetscape and this part of the downtown and east side historic district where the Fort Marcy Military Reservation used to be. Historic photographs show the white wooden picket fence surrounded the house on all sides of the and define the property boundaries. The wooden picket fence is varied in shapes and styles from spade to Gothic and currently are a triangular shape. The white wooden picket fence shares the incorporation of a territorial architectural design uncommon to the historic downtown Santa Fe, and specifically to Grant Avenue. After the Fort Marcy Military Reservation was decommissioned and New Mexico became a state, the Otero Bulgari House was remodeled in the Santa Fe style, but retained some territorial period features, including the picket fence. Over time, the lot has been encroached upon on the north side and the east side. The west and south property lines remain intact even as the fence and wall have changed. The white wooden picket fence has maintained a significant detail to the Grant Avenue streetscape and downtown and east side historic district. The masonry stucco wall on the property's east and south sides was constructed between 1941 to 1958 and helps to establish and maintain the character of the space around the Otero Bulgari property. The initial construction was out of concrete cinder blocks and stuccoed over. The exact date is uncertain. However, the wall is over 50 years old and was determined to have a contributing historic status. The height of the wall varies between 72 inches to 102 inches on the south side. Here are some historic photos, but I'd like to first go to the site plan. This is the existing site plan of the property. The proposed site plan, the alteration of the fence, and the introduction of new materials, which the applicant will share a little more in detail with you by alternating the fence and removing the stucco wall. But here's the proposed site plan, which gives an idea of what we'll be replacing, the historic materials, the historic structures. And here's a photograph of the site wall currently, the south site wall, the boundary at 135 Grant Avenue. Prominent structure from the streetscape as well as the parking lot, and it kind of encapsulates 135 Grant Avenue and kind of protects it from any outside influences. White picket fence on Grant Avenue are unique to the Santa Fe downtown area, downtown and east side historic districts and Grant Avenue streetscape. Something that we don't see throughout the entire city of Santa Fe, especially on Grant Avenue. Something very unique. Altering historic structures is something that we as historic preservation staff, we want to preserve and just kind of give you an idea of where picket fences are along the Grant Avenue streetscape. Just a view from the south on 135 Grant Avenue, 135 Grant Avenue on the east, on the west, on the left side, facing south, we see white picket fences just embody that Grant Avenue streetscape. As we face north on Grant Avenue, again, we see white picket fences just lining the street. So staff recommendation, staff does not find that all the exception criteria have been met, but the board may find that they have upon further testimony. Otherwise, staff recommends the application meet the standards of the code as written in 14-5.2D, general design standards for all historic districts, specific to 14-5.2D1A, the status of a significant contributing or landmark status. Staff stands for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So just for clarification, it seems we have two different proposals. One relates to a picket fence and the other relates to a wall. And then with respect to both of those, we have two separate code provisions that are in play, both of which must be determined by the board in order to permit the demolition, partial or complete, of either the picket fence or the wall. Those code provisions being the one that governs demolition in the historic districts and the other governing removal of materials of a contributing structure. Is that correct?
Chair Bienvenu, that is correct.
Okay, so the board needs to be cognizant of determining both of those two, whether the criteria in both of those two provisions have been met with respect to both of the two separate projects. Do any board members have any questions for Paul? Online? Member Beachside or Mather?
Mr. Duran, do they have a plan for replacing that picket fence? If they take it down, I don't quite understand. Do they want to move it? Or do they want to completely just get rid of it?
Chair Bienvenu, Member Mather, I'll let the applicant share their case with you, and maybe they'll bring that to light.
Okay. And I
Thank
think
you.
that's an appropriate question in this case. What is to be done, because that does reflect upon prejudice, and is, in fact, the applicant is specifically pointed to what is intended to be done with the property following demolition as justification for meeting one of the criteria. But we can let the applicant address that. Member Mather, did you have any other questions or comments while Paul has the floor?
No, I just wanted to know what the plan was, but I'll let the applicant say what the plan is.
Okay, thank you. Member Beachhead?
No, I'll save my questions for the applicant. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, applicant, you may step forward and be sworn.
Okay, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Evening, Chair Bienvenu, board members. I'm Jennifer Jenkins with Jenkins Gavin, also joined by Lisa Gavioli with Jenkins Gavin, here this evening on behalf of the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. And I will go through the presentation as speedily as I can, but appreciate your attention. I think I will be able to answer most of the questions that I have a feeling are lurking among the board members. So I think we're all familiar with where the property is located. We are on the east side of Grant Avenue at 135, which is the Otero House, and then 123 right next door is the former Safeway building and the new site, the site of the new proposed Georgia O'Keeffe Museum. We, of course, are in the downtown and east side historic districts. And these are the existing conditions. So this is the Otero House. So you can see here, this is the original structure. And then this is a circa 2000 addition to the back of the Otero Bergeri House, which is now the Georgia O'Keeffe Research Center. The picket fence that we are talking about is right along the west boundary. And as has been aptly pointed out, is a really significant and beautiful part of the Grant Avenue streetscape. My office is right here. We also have a picket fence around our front yard. And so this is, you know, I probably spend more time on this section of Grant Avenue than I do in my own home. And so we completely concur and recognize the unique nature of this portion of the downtown and east side historic district, and are here to not only preserve what is special about it, but enliven and enhance what is special. Oh, and the site wall is here. As was pointed out, this was constructed based on the timing. It's pretty easy to infer that this was intended to block a grocery store parking lot and provide that type of screening for a neighboring, for the neighboring property to the north. So a little bit of background. Back in 2021, the Safeway building was designated as a non-contributing structure, along with the parking lot kiosk that is right there along Grant. And then following that in August, the design for the new Georgia O'Keeffe Museum was presented as a preliminary design review to the Historic Districts Review Board. And then in September, following that, the demolition of the Safeway building was approved. And at that time, it was discovered that the wall actually, even though it's kind of a property boundary wall, it actually sits just on the other side of the property line. So it doesn't sit on the Safeway property. The wall actually sits on 135. So, so staff required that there'd be an additional status review for the wall, since it does sit on technically a separate piece of real estate from the Safeway building. And so that did occur later. And then in November of 21, it was a busy year. The development plan for the new O'Keeffe Museum was approved by the Planning Commission. And then during 2022 and early this year, the design evolved based upon feedback that we had received from the city, from the staff, from the Historic Districts Review Board, as well as feedback through the Section 106 process. As we have shared with you, the O'Keeffe Museum has received a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which does trigger a Section 106 review process. So we are in the midst, in addition to our city review process, we're also in the midst of a Section 106 federal review process with respect to archaeological resources and with respect to the design of the building and historic resources. And so the design evolved a little bit in the last year and a half. And then earlier this fall, the East came back for a status review of the picket fence and the site wall, and the board designated both of those structures as contributing. And then following that, towards the end of September, since the design had evolved for the new museum, we brought that design back to the Historic Districts Review Board for a follow-up preliminary design review, and received a very positive response and some really good feedback from the board. So as Mr. Duran already showed you this is the existing conditions, the old Safeway building here, the site wall, and the picket fence that runs along the west boundary of the Otero Bergeri home. And these are those existing elevations. So as you might recall, when we have shared kind of the design intent at a couple of hearings with you, one of the key elements that is really foundational to this design is how this new museum relates not only to its surroundings, but relates to the Otero Bigori House. How do we celebrate this garden area that is, as Mr. Duran pointed out, is a really significant part of the experience of this property and of the Otero House and the Research Center. And our goal here is to really celebrate that garden and creating a public civic space that creates access not only from Grant Avenue, but from Sheridan. Sheridan Avenue has sort of been described as the back of house for downtown Santa Fe. And we do not want to turn our back on Sheridan. There's going to be a new transit center that the city of Santa Fe is investing in. And so we are looking at pulling the building away from Sheridan, opening up the garden for pedestrian connectivity and access to the museum from Sheridan as well as from Grant Avenue. And it's interesting that Mr. Duran seems highly concerned about undesirables having some sort of negative impact on the garden. And that is antithetical to what the museum is looking to achieve as far as creating a really vibrant, dynamic public space in downtown Santa Fe. Something that is to be enjoyed not only as access to the museum, but to invite the community into this historic context so it can be enjoyed. So we do not want to close off this garden to the community, just the opposite. So HICPEs were prepared for both the picket fence and the site wall at the time the status review applications were presented to the board. And this just goes into some of the details, some of which is, already in your packet. And what the HICPE points out is that we recognize and respect the fact that the picket fence is designated contributing, and we understand its value to the streetscape, but we need to recognize that we are not talking about historic materials. We are talking about a contributing structure. These are the existing conditions that you see here that I think we're all quite familiar with. So what's our plan for the fence? Originally, our plan was we wanted to take the picket fence and move it back further into the property in order to improve and enhance the pedestrian experience in front of the property. We had several really good interactions and discussions with historic staff. And resulting from that, we modified our application. We are not proposing to move the fence. A vast majority of that fence will remain exactly where it is today. What we are proposing is to remove a small segment of the fence adjacent to the giant, beautiful cottonwood tree that is really such a significant demarcation of this property. As you can see here, the cottonwood tree is right in the middle of the pedestrian pathway. To get around that cottonwood tree, you have 3 feet to work with. This is not an ideal pedestrian experience. So what we are looking to do is to open up, let that cottonwood tree be the center point for the entry into the garden and into the museum. So we can open up that space, A, for the health of the tree, and also to greatly improve the pedestrian experience. And so you can see, these are the existing conditions, and you can see some of the dimensions. We have a fabulous, 13-foot sidewalk right in front of the front yard of the Otero House. And then as you approach the cottonwood tree, it chokes down to a mere 3 feet until you get the other side. Then you get back up to kind of that 13-foot dimension. And what we are proposing here, again, the fence remains in its current location. And then as we approach the tree well for the cottonwood tree, there would be a segment of fence here that would be removed. And then we open up this as sort of the kind of an outdoor entry vestibule, if you will. We have a stuccoed Bonco feature here, and this allows, so basically we are opening this up here. So we have basically almost a 9-foot sidewalk feature that, that continues as you move south into the 13 feet. And then this, again, this is sort of that entry gathering place and the gates that lead you into the garden and lead you to the museum. There are some ADA considerations with respect to, there is, the city of Santa Fe will not let you build a 3-foot sidewalk. They won't even let you build a 4-foot sidewalk. The minimum requirement in the city code is 5 feet. And there's reasons for that. And I have a feeling as we embark on the code rewrite, I think those sidewalk dimensions are going to only increase in terms of what is required and desirable. So the city of Santa Fe commissioned an assessment of all pedestrian pathways associated with public rights of way throughout the entire city. And this assessment is what has triggered a lot of the ADA improvements we've seen all through the city, but we've seen them really significantly downtown. We've seen them along Guadalupe Street. We've seen them in various areas around downtown because the city has a mandate to improve accessibility throughout the community. So the report that the city commission states that the minimum width for a pedestrian pathway should be 4 feet. We don't have 4 feet. So what we are proposing is a quite modest adjustment that greatly improves the pedestrian experience and the access and ADA accessibility in this section of Grant Avenue. So we did a HICPE for the site wall as well. And again, the original wall was a very low CMU wall that was built commensurate with the Safeway building and was added to and modified significantly over time. So the HICPE at that time did recommend that the site wall be designated as non-contributing, but that ship has sailed. And so these are the existing conditions. So as we mentioned, that it is clear that the purpose of this wall was to screen a grocery store parking lot, which is not an attractive neighbor from the neighboring properties. The grocery store parking lot is going away. So that screening is no longer relevant. So also in our dialogue with staff with respect to the site wall and the desire to kind of honor that south property boundary, what was discussed with them was including a unique paving pattern within the garden that would along that existing property line, as well as along the segment of the short segment of picket fence here that is proposed to be removed adjacent to the cottonwood tree to identify that. And this is a really common strategy for mitigation in all types of historic preservation projects, specifically around Section 106 review. And so this is also a modification to the plan that we developed in collaboration with historic staff in order to, again, to pay homage to that historic condition. So what we achieve here is we achieve an openness, we achieve access, and we also are preserving streetscape. This is streetscape today. This is the proposed streetscape. I don't think we can state that unequivocally that the elimination of a segment of fence behind a giant cottonwood tree irrevocably damages this streetscape. And I don't think that we can state unequivocally that a wall perpendicular to the street has a huge impact in its existing condition to the streets. We are here asking for what we see as fairly minor requests in the interest of creating an incredibly enhanced streetscape by removing a giant surface parking lot that does nothing to support the beauty of the streetscape. And to create a garden space that is accessible to this community, to be enjoyed, to learn from, and to have an experience of this historic condition. So with that, I greatly appreciate your attention. I'd be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Why don't you stay at the podium for just a moment? Don't rush away.
Okay.
Thank you. That was a very informative presentation. I appreciate it. And the visuals are extremely beneficial. So thank you for putting that together. Let's focus on the picket fence first. What's the current length of the picket fence?
About 121, 122 feet long.
And you're removing
About-
21?
About 21 feet, so it works
That's
out
17%.
17%. Yeah.
So pretty clearly, just the numbers alone tell you that, but even the visual, that's the more than 3/4 of the picket fence will remain untouched.
Untouched. That is correct. I
And
might
the
throw a
part that's
fresh
going
coat
to
of
be
paint on it,
removed.
but other than that.
Sure. And the part that's going to be removed, it's to some extent is already obscured by the cottonwood tree.
Most definitely. Do
Okay.
not see that segment of fence from my office window.
Right. See that even, yeah, and of course, passing next to that picket fence, you're not looking at fence, you're just looking at sidewalk because it's a very narrow passageway. Okay, so, you're very clear that you accept, acknowledge, and completely are on board with the idea this picket fence is an important feature of the streetscape
Absolutely.
and the property itself. So the question for the board will be whether or not the removal of that segment of it is prohibited by, or is not justified under the exception criteria and the demolition criteria. So then the wall, I consider, and I think the board probably does too, based on the previous hearing, which I was not at, but did watch, very separate issue, clearly. It's not really historic to either of the two properties per se. It's really something that was built in order to screen the parking lot, as you say, or perhaps generally the supermarket. I guess what I'm wondering, the positive aspect of what you're doing, of course, is you're really opening up a very large open space to the view from the street. Would you say that's true?
Yes, thank you, Chair Bienvenu. That is absolutely the intent, is to create that open space. The visual connection over to Sheridan, we think is really important, and the physical connection. And inviting and having those multiple access points, whether you're coming from the plaza, you're coming from the transit center, you're coming from, north side of downtown. We think those multiple access points just really open up. What we're talking about here is the creation of a campus, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Clearly, it seems that way to me. I do think that it's true that under the current configuration, the wall is somewhat essential for making the garden for the house what it is. Without the wall, it just wouldn't work with the parking lot next door. But what you're envisioning is something entirely different once the parking lot's removed. So, I do think it's highly significant that not only is the wall going to be, the removal of the wall would not only make the interior space aesthetically pleasing while you're in the space, but that would also from the exterior
Yes.
space looking in. And it sounds like you're saying that's from all directions, really. Just for clarification, on the Sheridan side, is it, even when the museum's closed and gates are closed, will you still be able to see into that garden space?
Absolutely.
That's
Yes.
highly
This
positive aspect
openness
as well.
here, we feel is really, this is really key. And the current Safeway building is right against the property line. And so, those bus shelters are like are right against the building. And so we have intentionally pulled this building back. And in the redesign, we pulled it back even further from Sheridan in order to open this up. So the pedestrian experience, the trees, all of this, we're working really closely with the city and the Public Works Department on the transit center and how these two projects are dovetailing with one another, relating to one another. So we're working really closely on that front in order just to really enhance this environment as much as.
Mm-hmm. Understood. So, and I'm also, so I appreciate your plan. I'm also very appreciative of staff's endeavor to really hang on to the history of this property and unique nature of it. One of the things that it sounds like they would kind of see as a compromise measure is a wall that is lower or perhaps broken up somehow. But in your plan, is that an option?
I guess everything is technically an option, but in terms of the intent, in terms of the pedestrian movement and circulation through this area, there is a desire for what we're trying to achieve is two sides of the same coin, a sense of seamlessness and at the same time acknowledging a historic condition. So, and, the wall would have to be, have openings and, so it's not our first choice from a design standpoint. And as this concept is further developed, we would, welcome the opportunity to work closely with staff to make sure that it's achieving, the desired effect.
Right. I guess what I'm wondering is if the wall was there in whole or in part, how would the entryway work? How would you access the entryway?
It's a good question. And that's really a big part of the challenge. So what we have here, and one thing I will point out, I mentioned we have a Bonko detail here. So with people, walking by and, want to take a load off or waiting for a friend who's parking the car to meet them at the museum. So the picket fence will actually terminate into a wall as it currently does. And let me see if I have an image. Yeah, you can see that here. So, so this kind of detail, which is really reminiscent of the existing way that fence terminates into a wall feature here. So we believe that this kind of serves that similar purpose of paying homage to that former condition. And then we have this kind of, like I said, open kind of mini plaza area here that leads to the garden and to the museum entry.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. I think the word plaza is a good one for this particular project because my concern from the beginning of this has been that we don't end up with a situation like the Inn of the Anasazi next door to the Hotel Chimayo, two buildings that don't belong next to each other and have really negatively impacted that streetscape, in my opinion. And these are two very different buildings as well. And you need something, if there's just a wall between them, I'm afraid that they have a little bit, perhaps too much contrast of style. With the plaza in the middle may help.
It's the connection. It's creating that sense of connectivity while recognizing that we have some modification of the vernacular along. My office building is a 2-story brick building. There is a lot of different vernacular kind of representations that are depicted within this streetscape. but the garden serves as that connection point.
Okay, thank
Chair
you. I'm sorry to
Bienvenu?
go on so long. Members of the board, questions for the applicant?
Chair Manu, I have Heather on.
Okay, great. Heather, please.
Chair, thank you. I know we're dealing with a sort of unique circumstance where we have a demolition and yet there's not a clearly defined path forward on what may be there. We have a good idea what may be there, but we have to remember that we cannot consider what's being proposed in the light of this demolition. And there are options available to the board. So like the applicant mentioned and discussed about a Banco, maybe there's an opportunity for the wall to not wholly be demolished, but to become part of an enclosing space that helps to define the character of the space as once having been separate, but a series of bancos or seat walls that could be available to the public waiting or what have you, that might still communicate that same thing. So I know it's a really hard decision to make. And just to remind the board, there will need to be two motions in this case, one relating to the picket fence and also one relating to the wall.
All right, thank you. I was going to suggest we proceed in that manner. I do think, though, that under the criteria that what is being proposed down the road is relevant in this case. The demolition criteria itself, if I can find it, the second criterion is whether the structure for which demolition is requested is an essential part of a unique street section or block front, and whether this street section or block front will be reestablished by a proposed structure. So that provides that what will take place after the demolition has relevance. And of course, in terms of the exception criteria for removal of historic materials, as I said earlier, the applicant has put forth a position that prejudice is established by the fact that they could not build the structure that they wish to build, the museum, which has been previously reviewed by the board. So it's a difficult situation. I think that the board needs to figure out a way to keep those two issues as separate as possible. In other words, the issue of demolition and removal and the issue of what will take its place. But at the same time, I think it's inevitably somewhat relevant to the decision. But Heather, if you want to disagree with that or add to that, I'm more than happy to hear it.
Chair Bienvenu, with reference to what is being considered in the future, I think it's you're 100% correct. This is a very difficult case to decide in isolation. With reference to the picket fence, there is a very good point being made by the applicant in that we need to provide better access to the overall public, and especially those folks who need special accommodation in that space. So, and the applicant has taken steps to mitigate that impact by only impacting a part of the fence. So, to me, that is a pretty straightforward issue, if it were the pleasure of the board. So, but with the wall, there's design considerations and considering the possibility of retaining that wall as a design feature might be, my only point might be a middle ground that the board can reach with the applicant.
Very much. Board members, questions for the applicant? Online? Board members, Member Beachside or Heather?
Thank you. This is Member Beachside. Thank you, Chair Bienvenu. You asked the question that I was interested in learning. about the percentage of the picket fence that's actually proposed for demolition. It's 17% of a very long, well-established picket fence is a very small concession. I would just like to point out to the board that we have approved the demolition of historic walls and fences for far less worthy instances like parking access. And I think in this case, in favor of a enhanced public entrance and garden space, that's a lot easier to justify. I would just like to comment on a few things that the applicant eloquently described and invite them to elaborate if they want to. I appreciate that the applicant reminded us that of the reality of the former Safeway building has been approved for demolition. So that no longer can be part of this consideration. And I think that the stucco wall is, while not on that property line, is very closely aligned with the Safeway building that's approved for demolition. It, on its own, it contributes nothing more than a visual border to prevent the view of anything but from the Otero Bergère house. And I think the other reality that the applicant pointed out is the pedestrian access has become limited by a cottonwood tree that probably has grown since the time the picket fence was installed. It no longer makes sense to have the picket fence that close to a tree. It impedes the access. It's not compliant with zoning. So I think, in light of those two things, the staff report's assertion that the separation of the Georgia O'Keeffe offices from the former Safeway building sort of ignores the fact that the demolition has been approved, that there's no reason to separate these properties. In fact, there are lots of reasons that they're coming together. And the transition that we has been shared with us for information is a really thoughtful design that was presented to us in September that shows a strong relationship between what the proposal might be to the existing historic significant property. And I think with the transition from the picket fence to whatever might come, it appears that the applicant is also trying to do the same thing there, considering the historic gardens, maybe making arrangements to transition that to new landscaping, respecting the cottonwood trees' presence and working with that. And I think that this is a very logical choice in terms of the anticipated function of this space, to approve the demolition of the stucco wall, which really has very little value, in my opinion, and to concede a small portion of a picket fence, which is largely intact, which does not, in my opinion, damage the streetscape because that of the portion that is left in place in the same location. I wouldn't have had a problem with moving that back 5 feet, because I think the visual impact of that fence is really the long line that it creates along that street. So whether it's right at the sidewalk or further back, it's still providing that sense of that contribution to the streetscape. That's all I had for now.
Member Mather online, if you had any comments or questions.
I was just wondering if they intend to replace the picket fence in the same spot and at the same height. Is that correct?
Thank you, Board Member Mather and Chair Bienvenue. We are not proposing to do any alterations to the portion of the picket fence that is going to remain. Maybe, maintenance upkeep, but we are not proposing a replacement of the balance of the fence.
So you'd simply just remove that portion.
Just
Is that
that
correct?
little, that segment behind the tree, exactly.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think those are all the comments and questions from the board. Yes, sir.
Bienvenue. As staff, I think we need to consider something. We have a historic picket fence has been here 150 years. And they're proposing to put in a middle fence on this streetscape. And that's on the Sheridan Avenue and Grant Avenue and throughout where the contributing structure is currently. So I'm hearing the conversations from board members, and we have a contributing historic structure here. We're removing it and putting non-conforming materials to replace it. And that's an interesting thought on Grant Avenue. So it's like, so we're putting in middle fences, taking out historic picket fences because of this design element that we have not approved on. It's an idea and it's a thought and it's moving forward, but it's not set in stone. But if we set this in stone, removal and alteration of this picket fence and stuccoed wall for something that might not be, but we're putting non-conforming materials over materials that have been here for 150 years that are materials acceptable to the Grant Avenue streetscape, that are acceptable to the downtown and east side historic districts. But now we're going to put middle fences here and gates that are not. And so it's an interesting conversation that I'm hearing from board members, and that's staff's greatest concern. Keep the historic material, keep what makes Grant Avenue special. But putting middle gates and fences, I think it detracts from Grant Avenue. And that's just a thought from staff. That's why staff doesn't believe that the applicants have taken every design or every type of material, every type of design in this proposal. So that's on staff. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like the applicant would like to respond.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bienvenue, board members. So I just wanted to clarify that we are in no way proposing to replace any portion of this picket fence with a metal fence. There is metal fencing associated with the new museum that will be coming before this board for, it's been reviewed preliminarily twice by the board, and we will be coming back to you in January for the final design review. Happy to continue to work with staff and the board as far as refining any material choices, but that's not what is before us this evening. This is a request to remove a small segment of the picket fence behind the tree. There's no portion of that fence that is being replaced with metal fencing. It's very important to point that out. We are also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And we are also requesting demolition of a wall associated with a former grocery store that's already been approved for demolition, in order to create an opportunity for this public civic garden open space within the downtown associated with the museum. So, thank you.
Thank you. Just for my own benefit, I know that what you're going to be doing is not set in stone at this point in time, but on your current visuals and your presentation drawings, what exactly is happening at the, I guess, the southwest corner of the picket fence and how it attaches to the new, I think, stucco wall that's going in?
Yeah, so the fence will just terminate, and it'll be a, close connection termination. into this wall detail here that serves as a backdrop for the Bonco seating. That also serves to kind of encapsulate that sort of entry plaza area. So this treatment here will be very similar to the way it terminates now.
And at least under this rendering, that wall would be the same height as the picket fence?
Yeah, it looks like it's pretty close. Yeah, maybe a little bit taller, but it's pretty close, and that's intentional.
And it's a stucco wall that extends towards the east,
Mhm.
how much?
And let me go back to the, site plan, I think. I can convey that better. So this is the property corner. This is the corner right here where the fence would terminate. So the wall goes in and then it does a little return here. So it's kind of an L shape. So we have kind of your classic L-shaped Bonco. And this dimension here is, I'm gonna guess, probably about 20 feet. Just scaling it off in my brain, I think that's about 20 feet. Yeah, my architect is nodding at me, so I'm going to say that's about 20 feet deep.
And then there's a metal fence at that point. I mean, a metal gate.
Yeah, and then this is where the new fencing and gate would be located.
That's a gate that would be open to the public when the museum's open and.
Yeah, it'll be open essentially during the day, during business hours, and then, and after hours, it would be closed.
And that you have a design, but of course that hasn't been approved. And
It's not been
subject to change. right?
Subject to change, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, well, it does raise kind of more than a kind of interesting question, which is this process of deciding on demolition again before we really have a plan in front of us, because I suppose there's always the possibility of granting a demolition request and then just getting rid of the wall and deciding we're not building a museum after all.
Chair Bienvenue, I cannot stress how unlikely that possible. I hear you, but that is, and the demolition of that wall is not, we are going to be embarking on an significant archaeological effort. So so the demolition of the building, the parking lot, and the wall itself is part and parcel of that archaeological effort. I would be agreeable to a condition of approval that if the museum does not move forward, we'll rebuild the wall.
Are there any further questions, discussion by the board before we move to public comment? Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. I thought.
Oh, no, you're fine. You can take your seat. Any members of the public in the room that wish to speak on this application? Mr. Eddy, you have already been sworn.
Thank you. What's at heart here is the attempted unification of these two properties that have been disassociated from each other for my lifetime in Santa Fe. And I appreciate that they want to unify these properties, and I think they've come up with a very good concept for doing so. I like the fact that they are planning to terminate the white picket and create a little bit of a cut-in with a Bonco wall that's stucco. I think that's an effective way to speak to the fact that these properties were once separated at one time for much of their history. The larger stucco wall, I do not see that as a great loss, and I see if that were to disappear, that would make the unification of these two properties possible. So I do not bemoan the loss of that wall. I like a stub wall that comes down 15 feet with a Bonco on it. I think that any suggestion of metal fencing on this streetscape is not going to fly. So, but I could see a stucco wall coming out in place of that metal fencing. And I know we're not talking about that now. We'll talk about that when they come back with their design. But to mimic a stucco wall with a balcony coming off of the New O'Keefe building is something that they may want to consider. So basically, I like where they're going with this. I think it's difficult to grant demolition in terms of not knowing what's going to happen here, but I think in a lot of ways, we do know what's going to happen here and what they're trying to do. And I think they're headed in the right direction. The onus is going to be on the city to keep that cottonwood tree alive going forward. I don't think that's the responsibility of the applicant. And that is a really beautiful tree. So I'd like to see this concept brought back and discuss these other issues that seem to be problematic for everybody. But I like where they're going with it. And I think that leaving the majority of that picket fence in place is very appropriate and will help to maintain the character of the streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Mr. Martinez.
Hello, Richard Martinez. As an architect, I wanted to comment a little bit about the building. The wall that we're considering between the two properties served a function that it no longer serves. It is not in itself historic structure. The way that the site plan works, we have a word for that in architecture school. The museum and the Otero House are in dialogue with each other. In other words, there's a relationship between the two, and the wall serves to put a barrier between the two, which is inappropriate. And I think it's very, very important. One of the things that's very important about this is that the Otero House, as you may know, was once one of the military houses that was built around the plaza, around the Palace of the Governors, behind the Palace of the Governors. And it was later given the Santa Fe style. And for me, the most interesting thing about it is to see those glimpses of the American house that was once there, that you can still see bits of. And the fact that this new museum has a dialogue with that building, I think is very important. And I think the wall is not helping and has to be removed, and is not a historic structure in the sense that it was a wall around a parking lot that no longer exists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no one else in the room who wishes to comment. Heather, is there anyone online?
Stephanie
Yes.
Beninato.
Ms. Beninato, you may go ahead. You've already been sworn.
Thank you, Stephanie Beninato. I guess I'm more in the line of with staff's recommendation of not giving this request for demolition. It went through a lot of discussion the last time, and the whole fence was considered historic, not just some part or majority of it. And I would be much better, I would feel much better if they made a bigger opening, made a more of a gate where the existing gate is, and have the opening come in from there. And I just want to point out that even though they're showing crossing right there by the cottonwood tree, the actual crosswalk is about a half a block or so down at the corner of Johnson and Grant. So people aren't going to necessarily come across the street there. The cottonwood tree could die. The sidewalk is grandfathered in. And what I see from the renderings is a lot of hardscape. I don't really see gardens. And what I fear is that the gardens of the Otero Bergère house are going to be abbreviated and not really replaced. I understand there wants a straight line opening to Sheridan, but I don't know that that's actually necessary for flow and accessibility. And I really don't understand uh, what is happening at Sheridan. Like, are there going to be fencing, like metal fencing there? Because right now the building wall is there. And what about these gates that get locked at night? Are they like actually on Sheridan and actually on Grant? Or are they in the campus and somewhere closer to the building? And I think that's really important because if you're going to take down the white picket fence to put up a higher, I mean, I don't even see how that could be secure if you have a lower picket fence unless you're going to put up more fencing that you're not showing yet. And again, I'm concerned about the lack of gardens seen in this rendering. All I see is a lot of hardscape. And if you are going to approve it, I would ask that it be no wider than 15 feet. And that's like something like 13 or 14%. And really, that's enough. It definitely gets people in and out easily, and it doesn't need to be 21 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online?
Member Bienvenue, no.
Looking at Heather, looking at you. Thank you very much for your comments, board members. Any further discussion, questions?
This is Member Beachide. I just want to confirm the motion that we anticipate or that's recommended by staff is that we have two separate motions for the demolition of one for the demolition of the stucco wall and one for the partial removal of the picket fence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could they be combined or no?
I think we should keep them separate. I don't know that that was really set forth in staff's report, but I think that's the best way to proceed. I think they're two separate questions.
Okay. And I guess I'm ready to try a motion if we're ready for that.
Sure. Why don't we address the picket fence first?
Okay. So this, in case number 2023-007411 HDRB at 135 Grant Avenue with respect to the whitewood picket fence partial removal. And I think I need to, because the staff report documents disagreement with all of the demolition criteria as well as the exception criteria, I need to address each one in a motion to approve that removal. So I'll go through that. With respect to the demolition criteria, the picket fence is of historical importance. However, the majority of the fence remains in place, satisfying that that criteria and representing a very negligible impact to the historical significance. Whether or not the demolition is an essential part of the streetscape, I would say yes. And for the same reason that a vast majority of the picket fence remains, that criteria has been considered and is not impacted. And the last criteria about the stability of the structure, as acknowledged by the staff report, is that it's in a decent state of repair, but and that is not the reason for this. And I'll just note that not all three criteria need to be met, just considered in this process. Because the picket fence has been designated as contributing, the exception criteria apply. The first is to not damage the character of the district. Again, the removal of a portion of the picket fence represents a minimal impact to the character of this streetscape. Certainly the contributing features of the picket fence remain with the small removal of this portion. With respect to a hardship, I think the hardship of attempting to unify two previously separate properties requires an access point on the street. Additionally complicated by the presence of a large cottonwood tree and a pedestrian access are reasons enough to consider this to address a hardship to the applicant or injury to public welfare. And the last criteria is to strengthen the heterogeneous character of the city by providing a full range of design options. I think that in the context of the reason for the request, the function of the property, this accommodation will most certainly add to the character of the city by supporting a thoughtful redesign of and unification of the two properties. And so with that, I move to approve the demolition of the 21 feet of picket fence in front of the Otero Bergère house.
Thank you for the thoroughly stated motion. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
You have a second. Is there any further discussion on the part of the board before we move to a vote? The pending motion. Not in the room, online? Member Mather or Member Bichette? Here's there is no further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Beachhead,
Yes.
Member Mather.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. So did you want to also make a motion on the wall, Member Beachhead?
I can do that unless someone else would rather. In case number 2023-007411 HDRB at 135 Grant Avenue, I move to approve the demolition of the stucco wall at the south end of the property. And again, I'll go through the demolition criteria and the exception criteria to document a different conclusion than is documented in the staff report. With respect to the demolition criteria, whether the structure is of historical importance, while the wall is designated as contributing, it is not historic material, and its association with the former grocery store is not of historical importance. With respect to whether or not the structure is an essential part of the streetscape, I think as testimony from the applicant supports, the east-west orientation of the wall contributes very little to Grant or Sheridan. So no, it is not an essential part of the streetscape. The state of repair is not relevant. It is of structural stability, but that is not a relevant consideration in this case. With respect to the exception criteria, damage to the character of the district, removal of the wall, in fact, will enhance the character of the district. It is not an attractive feature. It does not support character definition that we want to retain. CMU brick wall. With respect to hardship, again, unifying the two previously separate properties, providing a sensitive unification related to the functioning of the two together will be supported by demolition of the wall. And with respect to strengthening the heterogeneous character of the district by considering full design options, again, the new museum building can only move forward with the demolition of a wall that allows it to communicate with the other property that is also under museum, under the museum organization. There's really no way to unify the properties with the wall intact. And so with that, I move to approve the demolition of the stucco wall at 135 Grant Avenue.
Judge, is there a second to the motion?
I second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? It appears that there is no further discussion. Roll call vote, please.
Member Beechey,
Yes.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Valdo.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you, applicant. Next item on the agenda, discussion items. I'm not actually sure what that refers to. Who is supposed to be discussing under that agenda item? Since we already have agenda items for matters from the board and matters from the staff and public comment. I'm not sure who's left for discussion items.
Member Benvenu, we have nothing.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's anything from the board, but correct me if I'm wrong. Next item is matters from the board. Board members, anything you'd like to raise?
This is Member Beach. I just want to thank everyone for accommodating my remote appearance tonight. I'm recovering from COVID, and I hope that that was not too distracting.
It was not at all. I have one discussion item or matter, I guess, a matter from the board. Picking up on comment in public comments from Ms. Beninato on a property that she had noticed and wondered what the status of approval was on that. This is a continuing concern of my own. I'm just not sure what the procedure is for the public, board members for that matter too, but especially for the public to bring those types of issues to the attention of the city. And I would like to get some clarification if possible. And if we can't have that tonight because it's being sprung upon you, that's perfectly understandable. But if that could be reported back. And the reason I bring it up is because, you know, I personally, as a board member, often notice construction or demolition by neglect or demolition for that matter around town, and that I don't recall ever having been approved by the board, but I don't know what the procedure is to determine whether it has been approved, or if I find that something is actually a violation, where to go with that information. And I'm extremely cognizant of the fact, and I think hopefully this all members of the public are, that the staff is very, very busy. So I don't want to be the person that just picks up the phone and says, I saw something when I was driving around town today and I want you to go look into it. I don't think that's a useful way for you all to proceed. Or even sending emails, just demanding information about properties. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of process for this. And I think the portal may be one of them. But I would just like some staff guidance, not just for myself and board members, but more particularly for members of the public, to know what should they do when they have a question about something that they have viewed in the historic districts that they believe to be in violation of the ordinance and want either investigation of or something done about.
Chair Bienvenu, with reference to concerns being raised by the public, certainly that public member, if they know an individual person and wants to reach out to a specific staff member, we're all perfectly willing to help get down to what might be the case, might be the issue. And so, for instance, tonight with 604 Galisteo, we will be following up on that and researching it and be, you know, letting Ms. Beninato know what may or may not be approved. And so we will follow up that way. There's another way. We've tried to make some improvements to our processes, and there's a general email, historicpreservation@santafenm.gov. And each day, a different member of our staff, responds to all the emails that are being sent to that historic preservation email, so that there's a balance of workload, and we're trying to make our processes more efficient. So certainly that is another avenue, historic preservation at santafenm.gov. But as always, please feel free to contact any of us, and we're happy to help. And we'll follow up on that 604 Galisteo case for sure. And then Chair Benvenu, also, you've mentioned sort of a request for a report on administrative approvals. We have 343 approvals that have been done this year as of about a month and a half ago. And a lot of them are roofs, a lot of them are HVAC types of things, but we have not implemented that yet, but we will be reporting to the board our administrative approvals, so that you generally know as you're going around the district what has been approved.
That's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I think that's extremely helpful. And I suppose that could be a public record, right? I mean, if it's reported through, a meeting agenda item or something and posted online, that'd be something that the public could also refer to if they had a question when they're driving around town.
Yes,
Or
that's
would-
correct, Chair Benvenu.
Yeah, so that'd be great. Well, I mean, the fact that you're doing so many administrative approvals just kind of, it reinforces my point that I just feel reluctant to take up staff's time with questions like that. But if you're saying that is what you're there for, and that's what you think is the best way to answer those questions, I'm more than happy to send an email and would encourage anyone else to do so. But I just want to make sure that's what you're saying is the best way to approach the issue. So that's great. I appreciate that information.
And
your
Constituent
willingness to
Services
take
has
that on.
also worked with us too. So there's lots of times folks reach out to Constituent Services with concerns, and we're in touch with that group too.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that for me. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that all of you do. Like I say, I know you are extraordinarily busy. Any other matters from the board? All right, the next meeting is Tuesday, December 12th, 2023. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Mather,
Yes.
Member Baldo,
Yes.
Member Beachide.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you all for patience. Appreciate it. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.